They say blood is thicker than water, but no one talks about how easily it can turn cold. My father always said family was everything. But when my brother framed me for something I didn't do, my family didn't hesitate to throw me out. Years later, when I came back home, the truth was waiting for me, dying in a hospital bed. You learn early when to speak and when to disappear. In our house, silence was safer than truth. My father's temper wasn't loud, it was precise. A slammed glass, a slammed door, a sentence that cut exactly where it was meant to. My mother would sweep the pieces, hum a tune, and pretend the air didn't sting. Ethan was the favorite, though no one ever said it out loud. He was everything my father admired: confident, charming, the kind of man who never got caught lying because he lied like he believed it. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the one who fixed broken radios and stayed out of photos. It was easier that way. Our father ran a construction supply company, small, steady, and for a while successful. But when things started falling apart, he didn't tell anyone. He just drank more coffee, worked later nights, and muttered about bad numbers. The shouting started soon after, the late-night phone calls, the tension so thick you could taste it. One night I heard them arguing in the kitchen. My name was mentioned, followed by a word that didn't belong to me: embezzlement. I froze halfway down the stairs. My mother's voice broke through the noise. "He's your son. You can't believe he'd do something like that." Then silence, the kind that burns. The next morning my father called me into his office. His face was pale, but his tone was calm in that terrifying way. "The books don't add up," he said, "and your brother told me you've been moving funds." I laughed, thinking it was some sick joke, but he didn't. He handed me a printed ledger, my name typed neatly beside transactions I'd never made. Ethan stood by the door, expression blank. I remember looking at him, waiting for him to speak up, to fix it. But he didn't. He just lowered his eyes like he couldn't bear to watch. "I didn't do this," I said. "Dad, I swear." "You expect me to believe that after everything I've done for you?" That was it. That was the trial, the verdict, the execution. Within a week I was gone. No lawyer, no explanation, no chance to defend myself. My mother gave me a folded envelope with a few bills and whispered, "Give him time." I didn't have the heart to tell her that time doesn't heal lies, it just hardens them. I left home with a backpack, a second-hand jacket, and a name that suddenly felt like a curse. That night I slept at a train station, my phone buzzing with one final message from Ethan. "It's better this way. You wouldn't survive what's coming." He was right in a way. I didn't survive who I was back then. But the boy who left that night wasn't gone forever. He was just waiting for the noise to stop. And one day it finally did. You'd think getting thrown out of your family would feel like an explosion. It didn't. It felt like silence, the kind that hums in your ears when there's nothing left to lose. I spent that first week drifting between cheap motels and bus stations, clutching the envelope of cash my mother had slipped into my pocket. $240. I made it last longer than it should have: vending machine meals, overnight trains, one backpack for everything I owned. No one called, not even her. Eventually, I landed in a small industrial town 3 hours away. Found a mechanic's shop that didn't ask for references, only hands that could work. My palms bled the first month. The second, they stopped. The third, I stopped noticing. The nights were the worst. Cheap mattress, flickering bulb, and that endless loop of memory: my father's face, the disappointment that wasn't even angry anymore, just tired. Ethan's silence behind him. I tried writing letters. I wrote dozens, actually. To my mother, to my father, to him. None of them ever left the drawer. Each one started the same way: "I didn't steal from you." Each one ended the same: "But maybe I deserve to leave anyway." I lived that way for nearly 2 years. Working, sleeping, repeating. I fixed other people's broken things because it was easier than facing my own. Sometimes customers would leave a radio or a clock too far gone to save. I started keeping them, the broken ones. I told myself I'd fix them someday. But someday never came. One evening, after a long shift, I walked past a diner window and saw a news broadcast about a local company shutting down. The anchor mentioned the name, Henderson Supply Group, my father's business, my old life collapsing on a screen while I ate a slice of cold pie. The reporter said management errors and missing funds. My chest tightened. I waited for someone to mention my name, to drag the ghost of their scapegoat back into the light. But they didn't. I realized, for the first time, they didn't need me anymore, not even to hate. That night I went home and looked through the letters again. They were still there, stacked neatly, edges yellowing. I took one, read it, and tore it in half, then another, and another, until the floor was covered in the proof that I still cared. When the last shred hit the ground, I finally felt something like peace. Not the kind that heals, just the kind that stops hurting for a while. I thought I'd buried everything that night. The name, the guilt, the family. But the past doesn't stay dead when it knows where you sleep. And a year later, it came calling again. It's strange how quickly a name can stop belonging to you. After the company fell apart, I didn't just leave my family, I erased myself. I stopped using my last name, started introducing myself as Drew. It sounded plain, harmless. A name with no ghosts attached. I rented a small apartment above an auto shop, the kind where the floors groan and the walls sweat oil. The owner, Manny, didn't ask questions as long as I showed up early and didn't break anything. For the first time, I had something like routine. Fix engines, eat canned soup, sketch old cars in the margins of receipts. The silence grew easier to live with. Every once in a while, I'd catch a whiff of cologne that reminded me of my father, or see someone wearing Ethan's smirk, and it would hit me like static, brief, sharp, then gone. I told myself I'd moved on, but I still kept an envelope of the torn-up letters, taped back together, folded neat. A small museum of everything I never said. On weekends, I'd take the bus to the outskirts of town, to this abandoned rail yard where rusted freight cars sat like skeletons. I'd sit there with my sketchbook, drawing them over and over, trying to capture the feeling of something left behind but still standing. I think that's what I wanted to be. Then one afternoon, while I was closing up the shop, Manny handed me the phone. "Some lady keeps calling for you," he said. Didn't sound like a telemarketer. My stomach tightened. No one called me, not at work, not at home. I took the phone, said, "Yeah." There was silence, then a voice I hadn't heard in years, softer now, thinner, like it had been stretched by regret. "Drew," she said, "it's Mom." My knees went weak. I sat down on the nearest stool. "How did you get this number?" "Your old landlord, he said you still live nearby." Her voice cracked. "Your father, he's sick, it's cancer, he's asking for you." For a second I couldn't breathe. All I could think about was the last time I saw him, standing behind his desk, telling me to leave, Ethan's forged documents still warm on the printer tray. "I don't think I can help him," I said. "I know," she whispered, "but maybe you can help yourself." I wanted to hang up. I should have. But something about her voice, its trembling hope, dug into me. Because maybe I wanted to believe there was still something left to salvage, even if it was just the chance to say I survived you. I told her I'd think about it. When I hung up, Manny asked, "Everything okay?" I nodded, though my chest felt like glass about to crack. That night I packed a bag anyway. The drive home was quiet enough to hear the hum of the tires against the highway. I hadn't seen the place in 5 years, yet every curve in the road felt burned into memory. The air changed before I even reached the neighborhood, cleaner, colder, the way guilt always smells when it's dressed as nostalgia. The house looked smaller. The shutters hung crooked, the front garden overgrown. It felt wrong to knock, but I did anyway. When the door opened, my mother stood there, older, grayer, her shoulders stooped like the years had finally caught up to her. "Drew," she said softly, Then after a pause, no, that's not right, Adrian. I didn't correct her. She pulled me into a hug that felt both desperate and cautious, like she wasn't sure I was real. Inside, everything was familiar but drained of color. The family photos were still there. Ethan's graduation, Dad shaking his hand, me cropped at the edge like a forgotten caption. My father was in the living room, thin and gray, sunk into an armchair that looked too big for him. The oxygen tank hissed quietly beside him. His eyes found me, but I couldn't tell if it was recognition or shame that flickered there. "So," he said finally, voice rough, "you came." "I didn't come for you," I said. "Mom called." He nodded as if he'd expected that. Ethan appeared from the kitchen a minute later, clean-shaven, expensive watch, that same practiced calm. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said. "Neither did I answered. Dinner was silent, the kind of silence that makes forks sound like gunshots. My mother tried to talk about neutral things, weather, the neighbor's new fence, but the air between my father and me was too thick. Afterward, he asked me to sit. My mother left the room. Ethan stayed by the wall. "I know you didn't steal the money," my father said, just like that. No preface, no apology, just a sentence dropped into the quiet. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. He took a shallow breath. "I found the paperwork after the auditors came. I knew it was Ethan. I just couldn't face it, couldn't lose both my sons at once." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. My father's eyes stayed on me, red-rimmed and wet. "I told myself it was mercy," he said, "that it would all balance out somehow, but it didn't." The words didn't land like I thought they would. There was no relief, no vindication, just the slow, sick weight of realizing how easily love can become cowardice. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the dying light outside. "You didn't lose both sons," I said quietly. "You just traded one for your peace of mind." No one answered. The sun dipped below the trees, and for the first time since I'd left, I didn't feel angry, just tired. That night I stayed in my old room, the one that still smelled faintly of dust and betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. The air in my old room was heavy with dust and half-remembered summers. The posters were gone, the furniture rearranged, but the crack on the wall above the desk was still there, the one I'd made years ago, slamming my hand after my father called me useless. Some things never really get fixed. By morning, my mother was already in the kitchen, clattering pans she had no intention of using. The smell of coffee felt almost cruel, a ritual pretending nothing had happened. Ethan sat at the table, scrolling on his phone like he was just passing through a hotel lobby. "Dad wants to see you," Mom said, her voice small, "before the nurse comes." He was in the study. Same room, same old leather chair, only now he looked swallowed by it. Tubes snaked from his nose, his skin was yellowed, eyes sunk deep like shadows were holding him up. He gestured for me to sit. "I've been thinking," he said, staring at the carpet, "about what I did or didn't do." I waited. He coughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Ethan came to me after the audits, told me you moved the money to cover your gambling debt. I didn't even ask if it was true. I just needed to believe someone had done it, and it couldn't be him, not my perfect son." Ethan's reflection hovered in the glass of the bookcase behind him, still, silent, jaw tightening. My father's voice broke. I should have stopped him. I should have stopped myself. I wanted to be angry. I'd pictured this moment so many times, shouting, demanding, making him feel the kind of helpless I'd lived with for years. But now, looking at the frail man in front of me, the anger didn't come. Just exhaustion. "You didn't just ruin my name," I said quietly. "You made me disappear." His eyes welled up. I know I was a coward. For a long time we just sat there. The clock ticked loud enough to fill the room. I finally said, "I forgive you." The words surprised even me, not because they were true, but because I needed them to be. He nodded, tears spilling over, then reached for my hand. His grip was weak but trembling with something close to relief. As I stood to leave, Ethan spoke for the first time. "You think you're better than us now?" I looked at him, the same calm mask, the same sharp eyes that once convinced everyone I was guilty. "No," I said, "just finally free." He smirked, but there was something brittle in it. I walked out without another word. That night I sat on the porch alone. The sky was dark, the air thick with the smell of rain. Inside, the house creaked under the weight of too many secrets finally said aloud. And somewhere between the thunder and the silence, I realized forgiveness didn't sound like peace. It sounded like breathing again for the first time. 3 days later, the rain came and didn't stop. The kind that blurs everything, even memory. My mother called early that morning. Her voice was calm in the way people sound when they've already run out of tears. "It's time," she said. I told her I'd be there, though I didn't know why. Maybe habit, maybe guilt, maybe just to see if I still existed to them at all. The church was small, wooden, the kind that always smelled faintly of wax and loss. When I stepped inside, the whispers started. Old neighbors, old friends of the family, everyone pretending not to stare. Ethan was at the front, shaking hands, receiving sympathy like an heir collecting inheritance. My mother hovered beside him, fragile, smiling too much. When she saw me, she froze. Then she came forward and touched my sleeve. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. Neither did I. The service began. Words about legacy, redemption, forgiveness, each one landing like a stone in my stomach. The pastor talked about second chances. I wondered how many my father thought he'd had. When the coffin was lowered, the sound of rain on the roof swallowed everything. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just stood there and watched the mud darken around the grave. Ethan gave a eulogy. He said all the right things. A good man, a devoted father, a pillar of strength. He didn't mention me, not once. Afterward, people drifted out in clusters of umbrellas. I stayed behind. My mother lingered near the headstone, eyes unfocused. When I stepped closer, she reached for my hand. "He wanted peace at the end," she said softly. "He said he saw you in his dreams." I didn't know what to say. The part of me that used to crave his approval was gone. What was left only wanted quiet. Ethan joined us, his black suit spotless despite the mud. He looked at me like we were strangers sharing a tragedy. "You got what you wanted," he said under his breath. "What's that?" "To be right." I almost laughed. "You think being right ever helped me sleep?" He looked away, jaw tight. For the first time I saw it, regret or something close to it, but it wasn't enough. It never would be. When I turned to leave, my mother called after me. "You don't have to disappear again," she said. "Not this time." I stopped at the gate, looked back once at the grave, at her, at the house of cards we'd all lived in too long. "I already disappeared," I said quietly. "You're just noticing now." The rain followed me to the car. I sat there for a long time, engine off, watching the drops race each other down the glass. Somewhere between the heartbeat of the wipers and the echo of dirt hitting wood, I realized I didn't hate them anymore. But I didn't belong there either. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. A week passed before I opened the letter. It had been sitting on my kitchen table since the funeral, the handwriting trembling but unmistakable, my mother. I'd been avoiding it the same way people avoid mirrors when they already know what they'll see. It wasn't long, just a few lines, written on stationery that smelled faintly of lavender and rain. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll come once more before I leave this house. There's something I want you to have." I folded it twice, shoved it into my jacket, and told myself I was only going for closure. When I got there, the house felt emptier than before. The furniture was covered with sheets, the walls stripped bare. My mother sat at the dining table with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. Her hands trembled when she looked up. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either." She nodded slowly as if she'd expected that answer. "It's quiet now," she murmured. "Almost peaceful, but not the kind of peace you can live with." She reached into a drawer and took out a small wooden box, the kind my father used to keep his cufflinks in. "He wrote you a letter," she said. "After you left. He never sent it, I think. I think he was afraid of what you'd say." I hesitated before taking it. Inside there was a single folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was his, neat, deliberate, painfully familiar. "Adrian, if you're reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to face you. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness, and maybe I shouldn't. But I want you to know that I see now what I destroyed. You didn't fail me, I failed you. I built a house on pride and called it love." I stopped reading there. My chest felt too tight to go on. "He wrote that the week before you left," my mother said softly. "He kept it in his desk until the end." I set the paper down. "You both had years to reach out," I said quietly. "I had nights on concrete floors waiting for a call that never came." She looked down at her hands. "I know." The silence between us was long and thin. For the first time, I saw how small she looked, not in size, but in spirit. The kind of small that comes from decades of bending to someone else's anger. When I stood to leave, she asked, "Will you ever come back?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "I think some of us were meant to stop here." She nodded, tears brimming but unshed. "Then promise me one thing," she whispered, "that you'll live a life that's yours." I managed a smile. "That's the only thing I know how to do anymore." Outside, the wind carried the smell of motor oil and rain, the scent of every place I'd ever escaped to. And for the first time, leaving didn't feel like running away. It felt like going home. I left the house before sunset. The sky was pale gray, a color that doesn't promise rain but never clears either, the kind of weather that feels like it's waiting for something you can't name. I drove until the town shrank in the rearview mirror, until the highway stretched long enough to make silence feel like company again. When I got back to my apartment, everything was exactly where I'd left it: the sketchbook on the table, the coffee mug with a ring of dried ink at the bottom, the half-fixed clock ticking unevenly. I stood there for a long time, letting the stillness sink in. It didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt mine. I made tea and opened the window. Down below, the city buzzed softly, cars passing, someone laughing on the street, the sound of a train in the distance. For years I'd thought peace meant forgetting them, erasing everything that hurt. But standing there, listening to life move on, I realized peace was just learning to live without needing anyone to see you. I sat at my desk and unfolded my father's letter again. This time, I read it all the way through. The ending was simple. "If there's anything left of us worth saving, I hope you find it, even if it's not here." I folded it back up and tucked it inside the sketchbook, between two drawings of the rail yard, one when I first arrived, broken and lost, and another from months later, the lines steadier, the trains rusted but whole. They looked like different worlds, but they were both me. Outside, the clouds started to break. Faint sunlight bled across the rooftops, the kind you almost miss if you blink. I watched it crawl through the window, land on the old clock, and for once the ticking didn't sound wrong. It sounded alive. Ethan never called again. Neither did my mother. Maybe one day they will, or maybe they won't. But I don't check the phone anymore. I stopped needing the apology years before it came. Forgiveness, I think, isn't something you give, it's something you stop chasing. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, the hum of the city pulsing steady under the floorboards. For the first time, I wasn't counting what I'd lost. I was counting what I'd learned to keep. A half-broken clock that still works if you listen close. A name I chose myself. A quiet that doesn't hurt to hear. I breathed in, slow and deep. The air was cool, the night endless. Somewhere outside, another train passed, not leaving, not arriving, just moving. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for it.